Good evening, I'm Sarah. Tonight we're turning our attention to the evolving political landscape here in New York City, specifically looking at one of the more talked about Democratic mayoral candidates, Zohran Mamdani.
And I'm Mike. It's certainly a crowded field, but Mamdani has definitely been making some waves. We saw him recently on stage with some pretty high-profile figures, didn't we? Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez all holding hands, celebrating at Forest Hills Stadium. It really signals a clear progressive lane.
Absolutely. That image alone tells you a lot about the kind of campaign he's running and the coalition he's trying to build. And at that rally, he wasn't shy about laying out some pretty ambitious policy proposals. I mean, he's talking about freezing the rent, making buses fast and free, and delivering universal childcare. Those are big ideas for New Yorkers.
They are, and they're certainly policies that resonate deeply with a certain segment of the electorate, especially the younger, more progressive voters. That chant from the crowd, "Rent, free," show just how much those ideas are connecting. He's really leaning into this vision of making the city one where every person who calls it home can live a dignified life.
And it's not just the policy, it's the persona too. He's got this very distinct public presence. I mean, we've seen him in a music video as Mr. Cardamom performing Latin dance, even practicing Tai Chi. It's certainly a departure from the typical career politician image, and I think it speaks to a certain authenticity that appeals to people.
It definitely does. He's not exactly fitting the mold, and that can be refreshing. But it also seems to be drawing some pretty sharp criticism from more established political figures. I'm thinking about that exchange we heard with Andrew Cuomo and Sid Rosenberg on WABC.
Oh, that interview was something else. Cuomo really went after him, questioning his ability to handle a major crisis as mayor, talking about prison uprisings, mass shootings, even evoking 9/11. And Rosenberg's follow-up, suggesting Mamdani would be cheering during a crisis, then agreeing he just couldn't imagine him in that seat during something like 9/11. It felt pretty personal.
It did feel personal, and frankly a bit over the top. The cheering comment was definitely uncalled for. But it does raise a broader point, I think, about how some established figures perceive candidates who come from outside the traditional political pipeline, especially those with very progressive platforms. They seem to question their preparedness for the immense challenges of governing a city like New York.
And Mamdani's response to that specific criticism was incredibly powerful, wasn't it? He brought up the memory of his aunt who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she didn't feel safe in her hijab. He connected it directly to the experience of more than 1 million Muslims in this city, existing all while being made to feel as if we are guests in our own home. That's a direct challenge to the underlying prejudice in those remarks.
He absolutely did. It pivoted the conversation from questions about crisis management to one about identity, representation, and what it truly means to feel safe and belong in this city. It reframed the attack and turned it into a platform for him to speak to a community that often feels marginalized. And his declaration of "no more" really resonated there.
It certainly did. It showed that he's not just a policy wonk, but also a candidate deeply rooted in the lived experiences of diverse communities in New York. And he ended by saying he looks forward to being a mayor for every single person that calls it home. That's a broad statement of inclusivity, despite the very specific nature of the attacks against him.
And that's the tightrope he's walking, isn't it? Appealing to a broad, diverse electorate with these big, bold, progressive ideas, while also fending off criticism from those who view him as either too inexperienced or too radical for the office. He's got a lot of momentum, but the road to Gracie Mansion is incredibly tough.
It really is. What he's doing is challenging the very notion of what a mayoral candidate should look and sound like in New York, and that's both his greatest strength and, for some, his biggest perceived weakness. The energy at his rallies is undeniable, but turning that into citywide votes is a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. He's clearly tapping into a deep desire for change and greater equity for many New Yorkers. But the question remains whether that message can cut through the noise and overcome the established political machinery and the skepticism we've heard from some corners.
Well, it's certainly going to be fascinating to watch how his campaign evolves. He's definitely forcing a conversation about who New York is for and what kind of leadership it needs.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for tuning in.
We'll be back soon with more analysis. Until then, stay informed.